Welcome to Season 3, Episode 1 of the 6 M's of Manufacturing podcast. I'm your host, Adrienne Temple. You know, it's often said that a vision without execution is just a hallucination. In this episode, we discuss strategic planning and the reasons that many organizations fumble at execution. Providing expertise to this conversation is SCMEP Vice President of Business Development and Growth, Chris Wayne. Chris has a BS in Mechanical Engineering from NC State University and an MBA from Clemson University. He's a licensed South Carolina professional engineer and a Lean Six Sigma Black Belt. Working with a wide variety of clients from startups to Fortune 500 companies, Chris focuses on transforming an organization's growth ideas into revenue and profit. Chris, thanks so much for joining me today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
You know, I know we've put out some content about strategic planning where you kind of broke down the components of it, and that's really something you do a lot of for our clients as well. But I think what I want to get into today is kind of unpacking some of this stuff, maybe some of the pitfalls and challenges. I guess, one thing I wanted to start with and get your take on is, you know, I know having been a regional VP, for several years, a lot of times strategic planning came up a lot. That was sort of, do you have a formalized plan? Is it well documented? Does everybody know where you're going? And a lot of times when the answer was no, immediately we would say, have you considered building a strategic plan, just to kind of make sure everybody's on the same page. But besides situations like that, when might you suggest to somebody either developing a strategic plan or perhaps refreshing one? I mean, what's kind of the situation where that might come up and that might be encouraged from your perspective?
Yeah, and this happens all the time. I would say, first of all, if you don't have one, that's a sign that you need to create one. I can't really, a lot of people have what they think are sort of pseudo reasons for not having a strategic plan, but there are no examples of successful companies who have achieved success without a plan, right? So if you're in this thing for the long haul, you need a strategic plan. If you don't have one, you need to create one. Um, on the other side of it, though, when we're talking about like refreshing or updating a strategic plan, as the business owner, the plan is yours and the plan, belongs to the company and it's yours to change as you need to. I would say if it becomes obvious that it's not working, is a good time to go back and refresh the plan. Um, the vast majority, I think this is from a Harvard Business School. There's a statistic out there that's somewhere around 90% of strategic plans fail, and they fail because of execution, right? So if you have a plan and you notice that you're not making progress on the plan like you wanted to, that's an execution issue. It's not an issue necessarily with the plan itself. So if you're not making progress on the plan, you definitely need to refresh. You need to look at reasons, things that are probably keeping you back from being able to make progress on it. I I would say also, for like toward refreshing your plan, if you have a significant element in your SWOT analysis that changes, you probably need to go back and review the plan again. And that happens frequently, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Your plan's based on that SWOT. It's based on the content of that SWOT. So if any of those elements change in a significant way, it's probably an indicator you need to go back and review the plan.
Why do you think? I mean, I feel like even in my own personal experience, just execution of the plan. I mean, sometimes even the formulation of the plan or a really steadfast, clear one is hard. But why do we just struggle so much with execution of the plan? I mean, what is it that prevents us from getting it off the ground? I mean, you put so much effort into trying to crystallize the thinking around it, and then it just languishes. I mean, what is it that's happening there that prevents us from moving forward?
Yeah, yeah. So this is like the number one issue is the execution of the plan, right? I would say without being too flip about it, the high level answer to this is that we're not enabling success, right? So encouraging it is not the same as enabling it. So this is a leadership issue. This isn't something that you can just delegate to your people and then hands off, focus on other things and expect your people to execute it. I would say there are categories of areas that need work. Probably first and foremost, I'd say is poor communication, right?
Mhm.
Poor communication from the top down and poor communication between people and between groups in the company. So I would say the first reason that we have trouble executing a plan is for poor communication. I'd say the second one is probably in poor planning. You know, a lot of clients focus on the mission statement, the vision statement, the SWOT analysis. But when they're done with those documents, they feel like they're done with the strategic planning. And in a sense, it hasn't even started yet. You have to cascade that down into all the deliverables, all the action items. Who's responsible? When is it going to be done? What are the priorities? And a lot of companies don't go to that level of detail. So the poor planning, I'd say, is another element of it. There's probably an extension of that would be poor prioritization because when you do a strat plan, everybody ends up with a lot of extra things to do. So
Mhm.
if everybody's already busy, with 40 plus hours a week, and you add more stuff on, how are they going to do it? It's like they have to put one thing down to pick something else up. How can you? That again, this is about enabling it. You as a leader, you enable people to do this by giving clear prioritization. Um, and then connected to that, I would say is just people's over allocation, right? It's just like
Mhm.
I've never talked to anybody recently who has like time on their hands. You know, they're working while they're eating, right? They're checking their phone and answering emails on the way to the restroom and that sort of thing. It's just like we have no bandwidth. And the result of that, obviously, the number one thing is that we don't have time to work on elements of the strat plan. But the second one is at an executive level, it leads to short-term reactive decision making. So, you know, we're too focused on the moment to be able to step back and look at the business from the long-term perspective. So those are like I lost count. Was it like four communication planning priorities? Yeah, so it's four of those. There's another way to look at it, though, and that's through this discipline called change management. There's a model that a company called ProSci created to determine a person's readiness for change, right? And so strategic planning is going to bring change.
Mhm.
It's inherent, it's built into it. So there's this model that ProSci created called ADKAR, ADKAR, and each of those letters stands for something. So another way to answer your question, why do we struggle with executing the plan? It's built into this ADKAR model. The first A in ADKAR stands for awareness. Is everybody aware of the need for change? Specific change and overall change. Are they aware of the need corporately? The second one is, do they have a personal desire to see that change occur, right? Do they understand what's in it for them? What are the benefits? How is it going to improve things for them? Um, they need to know how to change, right? They have to be fully trained. They have to demonstrate ability. That's the A. Um, ability to execute the new behaviors. And then the last one, the R in EDCAR stands for reinforcement. Have we, as leaders, built reinforcements into the system to encourage these change behaviors? One of the reasons that we're not being successful from the human perspective is that we're afraid of change. We're afraid of what it could bring. We're afraid that things might somehow become worse than they were before. And most of the time, that's just simply not true. But those are two different perspectives.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I did a fireside chat earlier this week, and we were talking more about skill development and training, and but the same thing I said, the fear, don't let the fear of the unknown breed inaction, right? So
Yeah.
being afraid of or intimidated by change, it can lead to stagnation because
it feels like the devil is better than the devil you don't, right? And that's really, it's going to get you left behind. I mean, you're not going to achieve your goals that way, regardless of what it is you're trying to drive, right? So
Yeah.
that's a very real thing, though. I feel like people, at least from my perspective personally, I think it's very easy to lose faith in the strategic planning process when you go through iterations of it where it feels very disjointed. It doesn't necessarily have an infrastructure that supports continuity. It's like we get it on a Google sheet and we will revisit that next year, kind of thing. I mean, there's
Right.
no.
Yeah.
I think the concern is, how that can really affect your team being engaged in it, because they start to see it as a flavor of the month kind of activity, right? I mean, that was sort of even some of my experience in the past is just losing faith in the process and feeling it's meaningless, or it doesn't have any real teeth to it, actionable things. It's more, pie in the sky stuff. What are your thoughts on, because one of the unique challenges that I think we had was, if you are instead of being like an independent organization, perhaps you're a part of a larger infrastructure, you're a site, a specific part of a division, the creation of your strategic plan for your site and how that supports the broader, I guess, vision for the division or the overarching corporate structure. I mean, how do you navigate that? Because I never could see the connection with what I was being tasked with or asked to establish goals for. It's very hard to see what's happening out there. I mean, how do people overcome that or bring that into the fold so that the things that the site is doing aligns with the broader organization? I mean, have you had some experiences like that you could share?
Yeah. There's there's two sort of lines of communication when it comes to these strategic plans, right? Or to change management in general. There's two lines of communication. The corporate reason for change needs to come down from the executive level, right? It's like, this is why the company needs to change. These are the things that we need to do. This is what we're going to be achieving going forward. Okay, so that helps people, that helps to align people uh, around the awareness side of the ADKAR model of first A. The second one, though, the desire, is different. What the research has indicated is that message of how change will impact you individually as an employee, how it could benefit you, how execution of this corporate strategic plan could impact you, that needs to come from a direct supervisor. And so if the direct supervisors are not on board, they can't rally their troops either. So that's one of the challenges in this, is when your sole motive in a strat plan is to increase profit. There's nothing in it for anybody else in the company. One of the things, you're going to get the plan that you put in place. So, one of the things that executives at the highest level of the company, let's say, has multiple sites, one of the things they need to ensure is that there's something in it for everybody. There's something in it for specific sites and for specific individuals, to cause them to have an increased desire to see the plan occur. And then also, of course, we use this term cascading. There needs to be a significant cascading from these overall large corporate goals down to these individual bite-sized goals that these individual locations can achieve.
When you talk about goals, one of the things that I've experienced is sometimes we'll kind of play it safe. I mean, how challenging do those goals, how aggressive do those goals need to be? Because some of the things that may occur is we know there's things in the queue that we're gonna have to be working on, and we tend to sort of like put that up there as here's one of the goals, right? I know I have to do it anyway, but it's just kind of I'm not saying it's a just do it, but it might very well be. I mean, how do you, from that standpoint, how aggressive do you get with the goals that you set? I mean, is it meant to be something that's reasonably achievable? Is it a stretch goal? I mean, let's talk a little bit about that goal development in general from your perspective.
Yeah, okay. So there's a couple of ways to look at this. One is that if you're an organization that really has no track record of growth or track record of collective success, you need to start small, right?
Hmm.
Let's first learn how to win, and then we can increase our goals from there. The other kind of perspective on this is that, in my experience, most strategic plans are achieved within the first 18 months. We're talking about a 3-year or a 5-year plan is achieved, within the first year and a half. And that would indicate that, it's too simple,
Hmm.
maybe not looking far enough out. One of the reasons that it can be helpful to have somebody from the outside lead you through your strategic planning is to make sure that it's hard, but not too hard, right?
Hmm.
That you set those longer term goals that are going to take years to achieve to actually put you in a different place. Deciding, which uh, end mill to purchase is not necessarily a long term decision. Or even, when should I add on to the facility? For some people, that's an easy answer. There are, all kinds of operational questions about financing and hiring additional employees, and how can we revamp our marketing and that sort of thing. Most of my clients are coming up with goals that are achievable easily within the first year, maybe the first year and a half. And my role is to make sure that I'm stretching them out further.
Hmm. Do you find team composition for strat planning? I mean, is there a secret sauce to the team composition? I mean, is it, just the key, department managers or value stream managers and those types of things? Do you see people bringing in some completely different perspectives, maybe from other people in the plant that maybe are in support roles or even shop floor employees? I mean, what is the team composition for something like this so that you do even, kind of get out of that group think or challenge the status quo on that? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. You need to avoid the groupthink. You're going to have to, you know, I think as executives, we tend to um, eventually end up with a team of people who agree with us on everything. And there's a variety of motivations for that. Um, but we really do need to make sure that we have people on the team who are free and feel free to disagree, to
Right.
push back. We have to manage that friction to keep it positive, but we absolutely have to have people involved who have different perspectives from us, different, diversity, the ways of seeing the world, the ways of kind of processing information and making decisions. We've got to have diversity of opinion on the team for sure.
Let's go back to like small to medium size, let's say, businesses or manufacturers in general. A lot of times they're privately held and a lot of them may not have a strategic plan, but they've got kind of that business owner that knows where they want to go. And there's sometimes a hesitation to start establishing a strategic plan. You ask the question, do you have one? Do you have a vision for where you're going? Do you have this? Is it formalized or documented? And usually the answer is no, but it's up here, kind of pointing to your head. Um, I don't, from your perspective, what are some of the misunderstandings or maybe hesitations that a business owner who's kind of, again, they're the overarching leader of the organization. This is their business. What might be some things that get in their way of maybe taking that next step, or what is it that gets them a little reticent to like document it? What is it that you think is sometimes getting in the way of them taking that next step that would help them to really achieve the goals they want?
Yeah, I think at the executive level, if we're talking about a small manufacturing company with an executive who's fully involved in the business, maybe in sales as well as in operations. Um, They have a tendency to want to do it all themselves.
Mhm.
There's a lot of pressures on the executive level at this point. They're expected to be able to know everything and do everything. Um, at the same time, though, they have difficulty receiving advice from other people. It's like, don't bother me. I've got this. Um, so there's a sort of an overconfidence, bred in part by fear, fear of losing what they have, fear of losing control. Um, the other side of it, though, I think, is that they haven't really actually clearly thought through that plan. They have some general ideas of what they want to do, want to grow, want to diversify into this market, that sort of thing. But as far as the actions to make it occur, the execution of the plan, that's not clearly thought through. If you can't state it, you don't understand it. And if you can't state it simply, nobody else is going to understand it. So, it's really best practice as an executive to be able to articulate verbally or in writing what the details of that plan are going to be. The other thing I would say about that is that although ownership may be solely yours, execution of the plan is not. Um, you're going to have to rely on other people inside the company and outside the company in order to see your plan be achieved. No commanding officer in the army in the battlefield is going to have the plan in his head, right? He's going to share the plan with everybody else, and that's the way it is in a company. If you're not articulating the plan, if you're not sharing the plan with all of your people, you're not ensuring that they are bought in, they understand the reasons for participating in the plan, you have very low odds of success.
Yeah, and I think sometimes the impression I get is if I commit it to paper, if I say this is what I want to do, I think sometimes, I mean, and you tell me your thoughts. I get the impression that it's like it feels very fixed, like it can never change. Like this is not dynamic. It doesn't adjust with business. Once I say this is what I'm going to do, it's like set in stone, which can be a little. People may get a little turned off by that or feel very confined by that. But I mean, I feel like to your point when you talked about refreshers of strat plans. I mean, this is dynamic because business doesn't stay the same, and circumstances don't necessarily stay the same. So, do you find that some people get the impression that it's like once I commit to it, I'm stuck for the 5-year plan, right?
Yeah, I think, if I was a small business owner and I had a plan that I didn't believe in, a plan that wasn't aligned with, what I thought was possible or what I wanted to achieve, I wouldn't sign on to it, but at the same time, it's the executive's responsibility to ensure the plan is theirs. Um, but yeah, I think there's a reticence to sign on to some plans just because they're afraid of the finality of it. That's a human behavior thing. In product development, the same thing happens when it comes time for a design freeze. When you're supposed to be done with the design, button it up, start making this thing, shipping it and selling it, there's always somebody in the organization who says, no, we're not ready yet, for whatever reason, operational reasons or marketing or sales reasons. We're not ready to finalize the design. We may want to change the size, the color, whatever it is. Um, that's a sign that something's not yet ready with the launch plan or with the design. And the same holds true with strategic planning as well. If there's something about it that makes you uncomfortable, you don't sign onto the plan, but you can't just let it languish either. Again, the numbers indicate that you absolutely have to have a plan. So you do whatever's necessary to create one that you're comfortable with.
From your perspective, best practice, all those tasks, right? Because you talk about the sort of the overarching goals. These are the things that we want to achieve, 3, 5 years out. There's tasks below that. Like you said, it's kind of how you're going to get there, how you're going to scale to that goal. From your perspective, best practices on a cadence of review of that or touch points with the team that's helping to deploy or sort of nurture the development of those tasks or completion of those tasks. I mean, I find, like I said, it kind of gets put on a shelf usually somewhere in the nether regions of the shared drive, and then nobody really revisits it. How do you keep it in front of people, and how do you do it in a way that provides consistency to revisit, to discuss, to talk about progress, and kind of get a get a sense of the momentum behind it? Are there any things that you've seen or experienced that you would recommend people consider when they're deploying those tasks and trying to execute them and keep them top of mind?
Yeah. So, starting out, if strategic planning is new to you, and again, your company doesn't have any like muscle memory from having done this in the past, I would say meet every week to every 2 weeks for the first couple of months. That, in part, is because usually those first actions that we undertake are easy uh, to achieve. Uh, the bigger answer to your question is that you meet when you need to, right? That's not a very helpful response, but it's entirely true. If you have deliverables that are being achieved on a sort of a monthly or quarterly basis, then you can meet monthly or quarterly. And if you have deliverables that are being achieved every week or two, then that's a reasonable cadence for the meeting. But there really need to be two types of meetings. The first one is just to review the strategic plan, what progress has been made or hasn't been made, and update the plan. The second meeting or review is really about the process itself. Why are we not able to make progress? What are some conflicting priorities that we have? Who are maybe some people who aren't able to achieve, who are some of the Herbies, bottlenecks in the system? They're just completely overloaded with work and they can't achieve any of the actions they're supposed to be undertaking for the strat plan. So there's that element of it as well.
Before we close out, I just wanted to kind of get any final thoughts or advice you might have for, let's say there's a manufacturer, a business owner out there who's listening to this episode and kind of starting to think about, maybe I need to get started with something like that. Any thoughts or advice in terms of getting started, or kind of what they may need to have in mind before they get started from your perspective?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I come across frequently with clients is that they've been exposed to bad advice, information about strategic planning that's not correct. They've heard, misleading claims about strategic planning doesn't work. Strategic planning is a waste of time. We know why strategic planning doesn't work for a lot of companies, and it has to do with the things that we just talked about. It's prioritization, resource allocation, planning, especially communication. And those things can all be overcome. If you know those are potholes in the road ahead of time, you can avoid them, right? So one of them is to, look for some of the good information on strategic planning. There's plenty out there. Again, there aren't any successful companies out there that don't have a strategic plan. Googling strategic planning and trying to do it yourself is probably not a good strategy. It's gonna expose you to all those potholes in the road. Google can tell you what to do, but it can't give you the nuances of how to achieve it. And I would say also like self-help books, business books. They give you examples from past companies, past clients who are not you, right?
Hmm.
So those how-to books, they're not going to enable you to make a sort of a best fit for your company. It's kind of like learning to dance with those footprint stickers, on the floor, right? That's
Yeah.
not dancing, right? That's not it's not dancing. Um, so the how-to books aren't necessarily going to enable you to do a strategic plan that's going to work for you. You can go through the steps, you can go through the motions, but you'll in all likelihood, and the statistics are on this side, in all likelihood, you're just going to be one of those companies that comes away frustrated with it. I think this is one of those areas where it's important to get some outside help with your strat plan.
Yeah, and the whole idea of having a false start, it's so much harder, and that's true for any initiative. But to start something without the right resources and have it fail and have it, kind of be a false start, it's even that much harder to get the confidence up to try it again and to get your people on board, right? So it's really better out the gate to kind of seek some support and some guidance versus trying to do it on your own, like you said, kind of using those resources because there's more at stake when you're doing that. I would think that could hurt you in the long run with in terms of engagement and people being willing to follow it up the second time and try again.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And, strategic planning is a project or a series of projects, and every project has a technical side to it and it has a human side. And we tend to ignore the human side. But people resistance is what causes most of the projects to fail. So bringing some change management tools and methodologies into this process can help avoid a lot of problems down the road, especially with a restart. Let's address maybe some of the people issues, negativity, pessimism, lack of alignment, maybe friction between groups or between employees. Let's address those things first, and change management can help with that.
Well, Chris, I really appreciate you sharing this information. I feel like strategic planning kind of gets a bad rap because of some of the things that we've talked about. So I hope that this has kind of provided some value for listeners as well to see what it's really about and maybe some of the things that could be inhibiting them from really achieving the goals that they're seeking. I just really appreciate your expertise and your time. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the 6 M's of Manufacturing podcast. Special thanks to my colleague Chris Wayne for sharing his candid perspective on the pitfalls of strategic planning processes gone awry and presenting potential solutions for improving execution at leadership level. Be sure to visit the episode notes for reference links to information shared during today's discussion. Did you enjoy this episode? That's awesome. Be sure to follow our podcast and please share with your network. And remember, don't just make it better.